At the NFL trade deadline buzzer, the Denver Broncos made a move. Is it enough to push the needle? What do they get in return in terms of shipping a player off to Philadelphia Eagles? Plus, is there trouble in paradise with Broncos tight end Noah Fant, Sayre, Bedinger, myself? We break this down and much more on today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos Country? Welcome back into a brand new episode of Locked on Broncos, which is your daily Denver Broncos podcast here on the Locked on NFL Network, your team every day from the South Stands to the end zone. I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, joined alongside my good friend, Sayre Bedinger, co-host of Locked on Broncos. This podcast is available free and everywhere you get your podcast. Make sure you follow, subscribe, and thank you so much for making Locked on Broncos your first listen of the day, every single day, for all your Denver Broncos news, content, and coverage. And if you want to watch us on your television or your computer or your smartphone, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications so you never miss out on all the action. Sayre, my friend, what an intriguing, exhilarating NFL trade deadline that we had on Tuesday. I'm just kidding, my man. The Broncos, they made one move, but it was very uneventful for the entire NFL.
Yeah, certainly, the hours leading up to the trade deadline, of course, but I mean, there were plenty of trades this year. I mean, I think we got to give George Paton at least some credit for firing things up a little bit, right? I mean, the Von Miller trade, not at the deadline, but before it. But you're right, Cody. The NFL trade deadline is about as anticlimactic as it gets. Not like the NBA or MLB where you got like major deals trickling in after the deadline has even passed. So at least that people find out about anyway. So it definitely is different in the NFL, much harder to transition players from one team to the other. Obviously, one of the biggest names that's been on the market or potentially on the market, Deshaun Watson. It looks like every team that potentially could have been interested in him passed until, the legal situation is resolved, including the team that he apparently wants to go to, the Miami Dolphins. So very anticlimactic indeed, but certainly some moves to be talking about, especially in Denver. I feel like the Broncos made more trades than any other team.
Oh, they have so far this season. I mean, obviously, George Paton's been working the phones, but the Broncos, obviously, the Von Miller news. This is the one episode after the Von Miller trade where we already discussed it. I think it's kind of soaked in a little bit. A really great tribute. The Broncos allowed him to speak for like 10 minutes, and he posted a 10-minute heartfelt video thanking everybody, and he left the door open. He said, maybe I pull a Shannon Sharp and come back and see myself again in the orange and blue, which could happen after the season. Sayre, it'd be so crazy. He goes to L.A., let's say they win the Super Bowl. He decides to re-sign in Denver once he becomes a free agent. That would just be the wildest turn of events, too.
Where did we hear that before, Cody? Yeah.
I know. It's kind of a little bit of a pipe dream. It'd be so nice, man, but it's just so weird seeing Von gone. But the Broncos did trade another player away, ladies and gentlemen. Kary Vincent Jr., the Broncos rookie draft selection, 7th round out of LSU. They sent him to the Philadelphia Eagles for a 2022 6th-round pick. And Sayre, here we go back to the whole draft capital. And I said it best on Twitter. I put it out there. Draft capital is currency in the NFL. And right now, George Paton is just stocking up the war chest. It's evident right now, and we talked about it yesterday after the Von Miller trade. It is evident George Paton is really going all in on having as much leverage and ammunition as possible to put the Broncos on path to be successful. And I know that there's been this conversation amongst Broncos country. I'll let you address it here. That why are the Broncos doing all this when they're going to rebuild? I don't think that the Broncos roster right now is set for a rebuild. I feel like the Broncos quietly have been rebuilding the last 3 years, Sayre. They've got a pretty good young roster. They got a good young nucleus. The only issue is coaching right now and really quarterback as kind of the big focal point here. I don't think that the Broncos are in full-on rebuild.
No, rebuilding, Cody, to me means that you have very few pieces that you actually intend on utilizing in the future. And that's simply not the case with the Denver Broncos. We could go up and down the line. And of course, people that are listening even here today, or maybe people that would read our tweets on Twitter would argue with some of these names. But just to spitball a few names here, Cody, and I'll try to go fast on these. Javonte Williams, Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Noah Fant. Then you got Garrett Bowles on the offensive line, potentially Dalton Risner, Lloyd Cushenberry, the 2 young guards. You've got guys on defense, Draymond Jones, Bradley Chubb, Shelby Harris, who just re-signed to a new contract. Obviously, you've got Justin Simmons just signed a huge deal. Ronald Darby signed a big deal. Pat Surtain. Let's stop talking about rebuilding here for a second when we can throw out just that many names at the drop of a hat of guys who should be part of this nucleus going forward. If the Broncos were truly rebuilding, Cody, they would have done whatever it took to trade Cortland Sutton because he's not under contract next year. They would have done whatever it takes to trade a guy like Tim Patrick, who may not be with the team next year. This Von Miller deal opens up a whole other can of worms, potentially even including re-signing Tim Patrick, which kind of seemed like a pipe dream, like you mentioned with the other move earlier this season. So I think that that's something to think about with all these different players on the roster right now. It's impossible to say, well, the Broncos are rebuilding. No, they need a quarterback. I've said this a number of times. You throw Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson on this team right now, you're not rebuilding. You're Super Bowl contenders. And that's just the way that it works in the NFL. That's not to say that the Broncos just have the most elite roster that ever was, and all that's missing is a quarterback. But they have a great roster, in my opinion, a top 10 roster in the NFL, and a quarterback makes all the difference.
It does. I mean, look at what Aaron Rodgers has done in Green Bay with less around him, right? He elevates, and I know he said it yesterday, but Aaron Rodgers, similar to the fashion that Peyton Manning had. Look, the Broncos didn't have a great offensive line when Peyton Manning was a Broncos quarterback. He made up for a lot of those deficiencies because he was cerebral, and you see it in Green Bay with Rodgers. You kind of see it in a sense in Seattle, because I know the often complains that Russell does hold on to the ball a little too long at times. But the Broncos' emphasis is to really try to go all in on quarterback, whether they call the Seahawks, whether they call the Packers and inquire about Rodgers or Russell Wilson. If those don't fizzle out, then they're going to look to the NFL draft more than likely, because nobody else is going to be available, to be honest with you, sir. So I agree with you. I don't think that the Broncos are in a rebuild. I think that they've rebuilt the roster. And look, John Elway's done a good job in that regard of adding some of this young talent. I love the additions that George Paton made in this year's NFL draft. He's building for the future. We see that. So I don't think that the Broncos are rebuilding either. I don't think they need a rebuild. They need a coaching staff that can adapt the team to the strength of what the team can do, what the players can do. You need to be able to blend with your players. That's really the biggest issue here, Sayre, for the Broncos, is that offensively, they have a scheme that is archaic and it doesn't fit the skill set of the players there. And I think that's been the common frustration. And look, they don't have the quarterback on the roster right now that's going to take them to the next height, especially in today's NFL. So there is that. But Broncos Country coming up here in just a moment. Sayre and I, we're going to answer some Broncos Country mailbag questions. We also have some news on Bryce Callahan, his latest injury status, not to mention Noah Fant going on the COVID reserve list. How does this impact this week? Sayre, myself, we're going to answer your questions. We're going to get that coming up here in just a moment. But before we do that, let me tell you about the sponsor of today's episode of the show. It's your good friends over there at Get Upside. And ladies and gentlemen, if you don't like paying full price at the gas pump like me, well, guess what? I have some good news for you, because the Get Upside app allows you to never have to pay full price at the pump ever again. And with the Get Upside app, which you can download in the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store, it allows you to make money back every time you go to the tank and you fill up. And you can get 25 cents per gallon each time you fill up your tank, and that can accumulate if you travel as much as I do, if you travel as much as Sayre does. Listeners of Lockdown Broncos are making up to $200 to $300 a month in cash back, depending on how much they drive. And if you sign up today and use promo code Touchdown, they're going to give you an additional 25 cents per gallon cash back on top of the already 25 cents per gallon cash back that they give you initially. That's 50 cents per gallon cash back on your first fill up today at the pump with the Get Upside app. And once again, promo code Touchdown gives you access to that today. So download the Get Upside app today, free in your app store. All right, Sayre, jumping into the second half action on today's episode of Lockdown Broncos. We're going to get into some Broncos Country mailbag questions coming up here in just a moment. Just want to say thank you so much to everybody in Broncos Country for making Lockdown Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. It would mean the world to Sayre and myself if you hit that subscribe button here on YouTube, or followed or subscribed on your favorite audio podcasting platform. We have you covered every single day with all the Denver Broncos news, content, and coverage that you need. Plus, Sayre and I, we interact with you in the comment section on YouTube. We believe in giving back to Broncos Country. But Sayre, some news here before we get to some questions. Bryce Callahan, we saw him leave, have to be helped out by two trainers, not even go to the Blue Medical tent in Sunday's victory against the Washington football team, but carried to the locker room with a knee hyperextension. Well, he's going on injured reserve now. The expectation, he can miss 6 to 8 weeks. Now, I think initially, Sayre, we all look at that and we take a deep breath here and we think, okay, hey, you know what? It's potentially not season ending. There's not going to be any surgery needed. That is a huge blessing right there, because it looked like he completely destroyed his knee on that replay, the hyperextension. So he's going to be out 6 to 8 weeks, and it could take a little bit longer, but that puts him kind of in a position, Sayre, to return maybe towards the final 4 games of the season. Not sure how much you're going to get out of that. Obviously, this is last year, but just to get him back this season, I think is big for the Broncos.
It sure is. And it's going to pave the way for other guys to get opportunities again. Look, Kyle Fuller was not traded at the trade deadline, Cody. So now you've got an opportunity to go back out there if you're Kyle Fuller and totally redeem yourself, right? Like they say on Dumb and Dumber. That's what you got to do right now. If you're Kyle Fuller, you got to go out there, totally redeem yourself. And then the Broncos have a couple guys coming off of injury, like we talked about off air, and we talked about on a couple of previous shows too. Michael Ojemudia, Isang Bassi, potentially Duke Dawson. Those guys are coming off of the injured report and onto the field. Vic Fangio even stated last week that those guys should be able to practice this week. So we could see reinforcements coming at just the right time for the Denver Broncos. But Bryce Callahan, obviously, when healthy, man, that dude can play. He doesn't show any signs of like playing hurt or looking like there's some ill effects from the injuries that he's had in the past, specifically that foot injury that's been bothering him. But man, 3 years in Denver, 3 trips to IR for Bryce Callahan. Really brutal. Yeah, stinks.
I feel for him, and that's a frustrating part too. Injuries is just a part of the game, and players as much as anything. Bryce had a great interview this offseason. He said, "Do you think more than anything else that I'd like to not get injured. I think that's everybody's wish is to not get injured, but." When you play such a physical contact sport and you run the risk of getting your foot stepped on, I mean, just a multitude of things. Look at Matt Ryan, got stepped on his hand, was bleeding profusely this past weekend. I hate that, Sayre. I can tell you this. It's painful getting stepped on by a lineman. As a DB, there were a couple of times I got in the piles. Someone would step on my foot, and I tell you what, it came to the point, someone stepped on my toe once. It caused my toenail to fall off, and I had a huge bruise from the top of my toe all the way down to the arch of my foot. Brutal, my friend, I tell you. So I get it. That it sucks there. Some other news here for the Denver Broncos. Noah Fant has been placed on the COVID-19 reserve list. Now, usually an indication like this, it either means that there was a positive test or he was in close contact with somebody who did test positive. As of right now, we don't have the full details on it, but it could mean that he might miss Sunday's game against the Dallas Cowboys. I believe that the protocol, if he's vaccinated, and I don't know his status or not, and I'm not going to get into it. It's not a discussion here on this podcast, but I believe that he has to have a couple of consecutive negative tests in a row in order to be able to come back to the facility. So the Broncos back on the practice facility on Wednesday. They'll go Thursday, Friday. We'll find out a little bit more, but obviously this will impact Noah Fant's participation in practice this week and could impact his status for the game. So something to monitor if you're there in Broncos country. But Sayre, we have some really awesome questions from the avid listeners all across Broncos country who send in their questions for these Twitter Tuesdays, these mailbags that we have going on. I want to start things off with our good friend Bridget, and she asked the question, we have seen on social media that the players are not too happy with the loss of Von Miller, plus the whispers the coaches losing the locker room. What does this look like for the culture of the team, or are the Broncos just throwing in the towel for the season? You want to share your thoughts on this and I'll give mine?
Yeah, it's really tough to read this one, Cody. I think with Von Miller, the situation is borderline unprecedented. I don't know that we've seen a trade of a guy like this, specifically in Denver, at least, a player who has a realistic chance of being with the team next season. We've heard Von Miller say multiple times since he got traded, maybe he's just blowing smoke, whatever he's doing, if he's just trying to be nice, because we know Von Miller, he's a nice guy to the media. He's a nice guy to the fans. And he really does. He doesn't like to ruffle feathers. You can tell that he's not a guy that really likes confrontation, but I think with Von Miller, the thing is, you have an opportunity to potentially bring him back after this year, and you had a chance right now to send him to a title contender, and you had a chance to get unprecedented trade value in return, a second and third round pick on paper for a 32-year-old defensive player with 9 games left on his contract in the regular season. So the Rams obviously hope to get 10, 11, 12 games out of Von Miller, but to me, Cody, this is such a value that if the Rams present you with this kind of trade value, you can't really pass that up for a guy who may not be on the team. The best the Broncos could hope for if Von Miller were to leave the team and get them a big-time compensatory draft selection, the best they could hope for is pick number 100. I believe that's the last, or 90, maybe it's 97, something like that. So barely a top 100 pick. Now you get 2 top 100 picks for Von Miller, and you have a chance to bring him back after the season. Depending on what you do at the QB position, you might have to do some recruiting. But Von Miller's home is in Denver. We talked about that. So I think for the locker room, obviously players are going to be kind of upset initially, But at the same time, we've seen a number of times with either fired coaches or you trade a star player in teams around the league. I don't have any official stat on this, but a lot of times teams will rally around that and they'll come out the next game and they'll just look awesome. And not to mention the Broncos just won a game without Von Miller.
No, I mean, I think that's spot on too. And I think it's the unfortunate side of things too. When you're in a locker room and you go really close with somebody, and when you're a guy like Von Miller, I mean, you are the premier guy that everybody in that locker room usually goes to for things. When you lose that presence, that veteran guy who's won a Super Bowl, Brendan McManus, the only guy on the Broncos roster that's still here from Super Bowl 50. It's so crazy. We're down to one, and he's obviously one of the more valuable players on the franchise right now. But when you lose that, I mean, it's a big blow, right? Because now you're like, okay, who do we look to as other leaders? Guys look at Justin Simmons, they look at Kareem Jackson the same manner that they do Von Miller. But when you lose a presence like that, one of your voices, it does have an impact on you, right? And you go to those guys for veteran leadership there, especially the young outside linebackers like Andre Mintz, Malik Reed, who we know has said so many great things about Von Miller and his mentorship. They view each other as brothers, even though they're not blood related. That's what Malik Reed has said, what Von Miller has meant to him. So I think it's really important that we touch on that. I don't think that the Broncos are giving up on the season, Sayre, and I think that a lot of people, it's easy on the outside looking at the optics to say, hey, based on these moves, they've already given up on the season. I don't get the indication with them sitting at 4-4. Now, I think we both talked about it. Realistically, I don't think this team makes the playoffs. Not to mention with their conference record, already losing tiebreakers, the AFC North, they would have a very, very steep uphill climb. I mean, they would essentially have to win out. I mean, I think your only room for error is to lose one to two more games the rest of the season. The Broncos, it's a tough slate for them. It's hard to expect that they won't lose 1 to 2 more games this season considering the schedule. But I don't think that they're throwing in the towel. I do think that George Paton, though, is invested on the future, right? And Sayre, look, if the Broncos don't make the playoffs, they're going to have an entirely new coaching staff. And George Paton says, hey, this is now my coaching staff that we're building with. George Paton inherited this current Broncos team as is with the same coaching staff. So he can move on from it. He can build things his way. And I think Broncos country has to give him the benefit of the doubt here, and they have to trust in what George Paton is doing. I mean, so far I've liked the move, Sayre. I know you have as well. So let's get to our next question here. It comes from our good friend, newtype_JK47. He says, Kenny Young looks like a baller and a cornerstone inside linebacker thus far. It may be a little early, but do you think that we will be able to sign Young in the offseason? And what type of impact does it have on Josey Jewell or Alexander Johnson re-signing in free agency? Having a future inside linebacking duo of Young, Browning with maybe Sternad sounds like a great trio. Sayre, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, having Kenny Young right now, Cody, at least gives you the opportunity to be the first one at the table, right? If you want to re-sign the guy, it gives you have the first negotiating rights. No other team can negotiate a new contract with Kenny Young until mid-March. And we know for any NFL player, it doesn't matter what level you play at, it doesn't matter how good you are, how bad you are, millions of dollars is very hard to turn down, I'm sure. I've never had the opportunity to do it, Cody, but man, I can only imagine what it's like being offered millions of dollars in a contract. So the Broncos, this gives you options. You've got 3 guys. You can gauge the price of all 3 guys, 2 of them coming off of IR. So this to me opens things up in a big way. I think you try to sign 2 of these guys. And for me, it would be Josey Jewell and it would be Kenny Young. And I would bring those 2 guys back, and Baron Browning for me would replace what Alexander Johnson does and the things that he's capable of doing. Baron Browning, we know, can come off the edge. He can blitz. He's super athletic. Josey Jewell and Kenny Young give you kind of the more run defender types, but Kenny Young might be better in coverage than any of those guys. So it'll be interesting to see how the rest of this season plays out to me, Cody. But I think if nothing else, trading for Kenny Young shows that the Broncos, like, they want him to be part of the team. They traded way future assets for him to get him. So that says to a player, hey, we want you, we covet you. And then after the season, you get to go to the table first.
Yeah, and I think that's the best bet here for the Denver Broncos. And Sayre, coming up here in just a moment, we're going to talk with Broncos Country about, is there trouble in paradise right now with Noah Fant as he's liked certain tweets on Twitter? What does it mean? Or we're going to look into all the crazy stuff. We know what it means, but we're going to provide you with the context of what we know coming up here in just a moment, not to mention how the Broncos can get Jerry Jeudy involved a little bit more in the offense. But before we do that, let me tell you about BetOnline.ag, one of the sponsors of today's episode of the show. And BetOnline.ag is back and better than ever with a brand new updated site and user interface that makes it easy for you, the football fan, the basketball fan, boxing fan, MMA fan, to be able to access the latest odds, props, and anything else that you need, contest information exclusively at betonline.ag, the number one source for all things pro basketball and pro football here this season. So you can head to the website, or you can use your mobile device to go to betonline.ag today. And if you sign up today, make sure you use promo code Locked On. That's going to get you a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit today. Once again, promo code Locked On, get you a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit today at betonline.ag. BetOnline is the easiest way where you can access all the information necessary for NFL, NHL, NBA, anything that you're looking for, and even your UFC, MMA action, not to mention all your favorite Vegas casino games all in one place. So don't miss out on what they have to offer for the 2021 season at BetOnline. BetOnline, where the game starts. And our good friends over there at Built Bar. Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar that is out there on the market today. They have coconut puff. They also have the assorted flavors of 9 different flavors where you and your family can choose which flavor you like best by picking up a mixed box today at Built.com. They'll deliver it directly to your doorstep, and you get to determine which flavor is the one that you want to be locked into here at the Locked On Broncos podcast. But with Built Bar, ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned, the healthiest protein bar that is out there on the market today. The bars contain 17 grams of protein, 130 calories, and only 4 grams of sugar. And the best part of it all, it doesn't taste like a protein bar. It tastes legitimately like a candy bar because the bars are covered in 100% chocolate. They're soft and they're easy to chew. And Sarah, one of my favorite tricks is putting a Built Bar in the fridge for about an hour, taking a bite into it. I tell you what, it is game-changing. It is clutch. And I want you and your family to try Built Bar today by going to Built.com. Use promo code LOCK15, and that's going to get you 15% off your next order today. Once again, promo code LOCK15 gets you 15% off at Built.com. All right, Sarah, as we jump into the fourth quarter action on today's episode, Locked On Broncos, the question I wanted to present out here as well, because it's one that I had that Broncos Country wants to know. And our good friend Jordan Lopez actually had this as well in our mailbag. He sent it our way. He says, hey, how would you guys get Jerry Jeudy more involved on Sunday against the Dallas Cowboys? He is way too dynamic to only have 4 targets the whole game, which I do agree with, Sarah. But as the Broncos ease him in, there's logistics. You also have to factor how the offense looks right now. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I said it last week, Cody. I felt like the Broncos needed to, utilize the pass to set up the run. And to me, that means attack downfield, attack downfield, attack downfield. We didn't see that in this game. It didn't matter if it was Jerry Jeudy, if it was Courtland Sutton, if it was Noah Fant, Tim Patrick. We just simply didn't see that. So against the Dallas Cowboys, you're playing on the road. You got to be aggressive. And Jerry Jeudy, to get him involved, I think you got to see some more slant work, some slants, some quick throws, some stuff over that we haven't seen that beautiful deep over that Jerry made so many big plays on last season. So I want to see more of all that. More of anything, Jerry Jeudy. And anything. I'll take anything at this point, Cody. It's hard to be.
I did not like the end around though, Sarah. Like I said, for him coming off the ankle, when they did that reverse end around, I was like, why are they doing that with Jerry Jeudy? Like, especially on his ankle. But Jerry even said himself a couple of days ago, he's like, hey, I felt good. My ankle felt great. So you know what? Who am I to question?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it was another one of those things where it was just like going back and forth, just torturous to be watching this on TV. The offense trying to get downfield going like this. And it's just, I don't know. I'm with you on that. I want to see some more vertical stuff. But I would get Jerry some opportunities off slants, get him some yak chances. But I've been saying that for weeks, Cody, and we haven't seen it. So regardless if it's Jeudy or not.
Pat Shurmur does not listen to Locked On Broncos podcast, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, it's evident clear as day. We're like, hey, get Albert O more involved. Though we did see Albert O get a couple of targets. I love to see that, but that wasn't because of us. Pat Shurmur doesn't care. Or apparently, according to Pat Shurmur, he doesn't read, listen, or watch anything that has to do with Broncos media coverage. So I guess we're fortunate in that regard. But one of our other questions here, too, and this will wrap up today's episode, Locked On Broncos, comes in from Alexander Cook, and he says, what's your take on Noah Fant's situation? Just to provide context here to anybody that may not know, Noah Fant on social media, there was a screenshot going around of him liking tweets saying that that people hope that the Broncos trade him and that the Broncos aren't throwing him the ball and that, he's a bust. And to be honest with you, you can read it a multitude of ways, Sarah. And I think everyone's first inclination is to think he wants out of Denver. He's unhappy. I don't think that this season is going as how Noah Fant had planned. And look, and I also want to put into perspective too, Noah Fant's been through a lot this year. And I want to bring this up. And there might be people in the comment section that give me crap about this just because, look, I care about the human side of things. But also Noah Fant, he's been dealing with an ankle injury. I'm not going to try to use that as an excuse, but he also just lost his mom recently. And if anybody has ever gone through the loss of a family member, it affects us in different ways, right? So, for example, for him to go out there on Sunday, you could tell there's just a lot going on. He's thinking too much with the penalties, false starts, things like that. I think a lot of people are trying to pile on Noah Fant right now. And Sarah, to be honest with you, look, I get it. he's got to play better. And I think that everyone wants to see him play better. He wants to play better. I think that there's a lot of unwarranted negativity being hurled at Noah Fant's way. So what he's doing is, and he went on an interview with some radio station I don't care to mention. He mentioned that he's using it as fuel. He's using it, their receipts for when he does explode. He wants to go back to those. And personally, Sayre, I love it. I love that mentality.
I do too. And I think you're spot on. I was going to bring it up if you didn't about his mom passing away.
Yeah.
And it's impossible to quantify unless you've been through something like that or been through something like that and played in the NFL. How can you possibly quantify what a guy is going through mentally on a day? I mean, maybe he's used to looking up in the stands and seeing his mom there, or maybe he's used to a pregame text from his mom. I mean, we can't just sit here and say that we understand exactly what a guy's going through out there. There is a mental aspect of things, Cody, to playing in the NFL. It's such a physically grueling game. To be able to get through things mentally as well, you have to put all these different pieces together. So for Noah Fant, I don't even think he's playing bad enough to warrant the kind of talk that people are calling him a bust in my mentions, Cody, which I haven't seen that since his rookie season. And and people were calling that after 6 games. So yeah, he's not a good pass blocker. And yeah, he might need to be better in that regard going forward when he's asked to do that. But I feel like the Broncos aren't putting him in position to succeed. The guy lost his mom recently, and also he's been dealing with an injury. Like you said, he's been playing through it and trying to help the team out in the process. So people are being way too hard on Noah Fant without consider. This isn't Madden, right?
No.
You're not playing. We're not sitting here with a controller and putting Noah Fant into the lineup with our controller with the A and the B button and putting him up on top of the depth chart and expecting, an 85 overall or whatever the heck he is, because I don't play that stupid game. Whatever, you're expecting him to be 85 overall, and he's not 85 overall during the real game. So, well, he must be a bust. I mean, just like, it's ridiculous. Like, get off the guy's back and let's see what he can do. Wait till we get some actual offensive coordinating and coaching into this building, Cody, and we'll see what Noah Fant is capable of doing when he can stretch the field, when he can go out there and create yardage after the catch and be that 85 overall or whatever the heck he is on Madden. That's what I'm waiting to see.
I love that you mentioned that, Sayre, because I'll be honest with you. I play Madden, and you know what I don't do with Noah Fant in Madden? I don't run him on drag routes. I send him vertically. I put him to the outside one-on-one against smaller cornerbacks, which the Broncos should do. And I think people forget as well, Sayre, and I like that we're going on this tangent here. I think people forget 2 years ago with Rich Scangarello, not saying Rich Scangarello is a great offensive coordinator. He had a lot of struggles, folks, and he was not good as a young guy, right? But here's the deal. At least he got Noah Fant in space. He got him vertically. He got him across the field, not at 3 yards depth, close to the line of scrimmage. He extended Noah Fant, and we saw a more efficient Noah Fant with Scangarello. Things dropped off once Pat Shurmur got into the mix here, ladies and gentlemen, because it all started. Remember last year, Tennessee, you get a great first half, unbelievable utilization. They don't even target him in the second half. Pittsburgh, they don't target him in the first half, but they target him in the second half, and he goes off. So it's like, Sayre, I get it. I wish this was Madden because things would be done right, my friend, if we could just control it, my friend. But, with that said, Broncos Country, thank you so much for your questions here on our mailbag episode, Lockdown Broncos. You ever want to get in the mix? You have Broncos questions, shoot myself or Sayre a DM on Twitter at Sayre Bedinger, at Cody Roark NFL, at Lockdown Broncos, and, even in the YouTube comment section. We appreciate you taking time out of your day to tune in, to listen to us talk, to watch us talk Broncos football. We do it here every single day, the Lockdown Broncos podcast, free and available everywhere you get your podcast. Hit that subscribe button here on YouTube so you never miss out on a day's worth of Denver Broncos news, content, and coverage. With that said, I'm Cody Roark, speaking for my good co-host, good friend here, Sayre Bedinger. We'll see you tomorrow for a brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.